And welcome everybody to a new MoCast episode. We are visiting Unholy DK once again, and if you don't know who our guests are, well, they're gonna introduce themselves fairly shortly, but I hope you guys enjoyed this one because Unholy kind of went through a little bit of a ride since
the last time we talked about it, for sure.
So let's see exactly how it is. But before that, let's introduce our guests.
Yeah, some very new people on this podcast. You may not recognize them, but sure. Let's let the boys introduce themselves and we carry on.
I guess I'll go first this time. Hey, everybody. I'm Taeznak. I write the Simulation Craft action priority lists, help maintain that, and do a lot of theory crafting for Unholy DK.
Do you play DK?
When I play, yes.
He's more busy with the appeal and the sim crafting. And Taze is one of like the bigger brains when it comes to theory crafting and stuff. And you can thank him for a lot of the stuff you find out on Raidbot. So, and we have Mr. Bicepspump himself.
Hey guys, Bicepspump here. I write the Wowhead and Isoveins DPS Death Knight guides, so both Frost and Unholy, and also make video guide content on YouTube.
Definitely gotta check it out.
I do play Unholy.
I know you do. I know you do.
This is main is Unholy.
This is the thing, right? If you want to get advanced info in terms of Unholy DK, but not only that, there's also beginner stuff over there as well. Biceps really covers all things, especially Unholy DK. So don't go check out his channel. Check out his channel. It's gonna be in the description.
Is it just me, or do I feel like every time Biceps introduces himself, he needs to flex?
Because it's Biceps and it's popping. Oh my god, man, what you did there. Flame is smart,
I have a degree in something.
But yeah, definitely check the boys out. The link's is gonna be in the description as always. The Acros Discord, all of the socials, Biceps YouTube and all of that. Check the boys out if you want to really get going on to the DK. Oh, yeah. But let's talk Unholy, because was it Frost or Unholy the first podcast we did?
It was Frost, but I think Unholy might have been the second.
It was, I think it was Assassination, then it was Unholy or something.
It was very close.
Anyway. So it was. We were still in Castle Nathria, right? There was I don't even know if 9.1 PTR hit yet. I don't think so, because that was in April or something. So we didn't know shit.
I think it was way back. I think we started to do the class podcast either at the end of February or March.
Something like that. Yeah, I think even earlier though. Regardless, Unholy DK at that time was pretty good standings, I would say. Not to say that it's bad now, but it definitely has some issues. Moving from 9.0 to 9.1. And I don't know anything about those issues, but I'm sure our guests today have a lot to say on that.
We can definitely address the change in Unholy's performance, because I do remember Nathria seeing the Unholies all the way at the top, and I'm not sure if anti-magic zone being nerfed was the reason why it fell. I mean, maybe it fell in the top echelon.
It's more.
But in the terms of overall damage, it feels like maybe Unholy should have gotten some love. But I'm sure you guys can further elaborate upon this.
Let's talk about what changed from 9.0 to 9.1.
Bicep, why don't you start this off?
Yes. I feel like there are quite a lot of misconceptions here, because I see a lot of talk being thrown around that Unholy doesn't scale well with secondary stats. The reality is that Unholy scales perfectly fine with secondaries. It's just that our conduits are very lackluster. So we had Castle Nathria, everyone had one or maybe two conduits if they run a different soulbind. When we move away from Castle Nathria, everyone picks up 3 conduits or 2. And everyone that scales well with conduits obviously scales well due to that. Yeah. And then you have lots of tuning coming in. So some classes gain buffs. Some classes get specific weapons like Rose getting Sylvana's dagger. Those kind of things. And all of that compounds into making them scale better than Unholy. So yeah, lots of different factors. One of them also is that we don't get PI anymore. So in Castle Nathria, everyone would PI the DK because that was awesome. But now, you get boomers get PIs, you get warlocks that get PIs. And that would also skew data not in Unholy's favor.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and to kind of emphasize on the secondary stat scaling thing, Unholy actually scales incredibly well with secondary stats, one of the best. If you were to stack them all up, Unholy is number 3, I think. It's insane how well it scales, but we have conduits that just don't scale past a specific point, like Convocation of the Dead, which is like one of the major shining issues with Unholy right now. And then the third conduit slot as well, in which we slot in adaptive armor fragment. I mean, it's a tank conduit. It's not going to be that good, but it's our best third option.
Yeah. A lot of DPS have that, actually.
Yeah, and healers as well. That was surprising.
It's simming really good in a lot of DPS.
It's just raw main stat.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just, you know, flat damage when you could have something a little bit more interesting. So is it just a problem with conduits, or is it like the encounter design by any chance? I mean, mostly talking about raids, of course, here. I'm not sure how much the loss of pride hurt Unholy, but I know you have Champion's brand. I would imagine that would be pretty good for Unholy if you can get it to give you mastery, but Biceps might know a little bit more about Mythic Plus as well. So how do you guys feel? Like, we can also discuss about conduits as well, but how do you guys feel Unholy performs in the raid and in the new season, the second season of Mythic Plus?
I do think that the fights in the raid obviously means certain specs are better. Casanafra was very well designed for Unholy. We had things like Side and Aphrius, where you could use the epidemic span in a very good manner, and we don't really have that in the current raid, so that's obviously going to skew the data downwards. For Mythic Plus, I feel like Unholy is in the same spot it has been in a while. We do decent damage, we have decent survivability, we don't bring, you know, that much utility to the table. We have other classes that just perform better in most areas, which means that Unholy isn't that much of a meta class there either.
Yeah, the only thing fun in Mythic Plus and 9.1, well, actually 9.1.5 now, is a new Night Fae build that I've been messing around with. A lot of people have been having fun with it, but it's not the best. I'm not going to say it's the best. It's just fun.
Sometimes that's all you need, a bit of fun.
I mean, I would think, whenever I think DK Night Fae, I think of Raz DK. So can you elaborate a little bit more on the build, Taze?
It's not even that complicated, but it does bring in some things that we haven't used all expansion. So obviously Night Fae for Unholy, which has been completely ignored for the most part. I think when I looked at it in 9.1, it was at like 1.2% of the total Unholy population. But you bring in Night Fae, you bring in Defile, as well as the buffed Withering Ground Conduit, and you get this build that just does insane damage from Defile alone. It ends up being like 18% of your overall damage, which is just bonkers for something you just drop on the ground. And then you combine that with Infected Claws, Bursting Sores, and you have something that feels slightly akin to the old 8.3 Bursting Sores build that Unholy did. It doesn't scale nearly as insanely because the Scourge Strike cap, but it's still real fun.
So what I'm getting here is that basically, because a lot of the content in 9.1 kind of benefited more other specs, talking about, you know, tuning, conduits, drops from the raids and stuff like that. This is like more or less the major things that kind of, I wouldn't say set Unholy DK way back. It's that you can still get a proper Unholy DK in your group and do fine. You know, that's not a big issue. But like, what do you guys feel is like the most important thing that they should address for Unholy moving to 9.2? Obviously, today when we're recording this, we're going to have the 9.2 announcement later on. And I don't think we're going to see necessarily things addressed in terms of like, oh, Unholy DK gets this or that. But from your guys' perspective, like the one biggest thing that they can do for 9.2 for Unholy DKs, what would that be?
I definitely feel like they should focus on the conduits. So Convocation of the Dead, add some kind of effect to it to make it scale. Because, you know, after I level 225, whatever it is, it really doesn't add much, and that really doesn't make sense. Like, other conduits are eventually going to outscale it because it's just flat value. I would love if they attached, you know, gaining strength of bursting wounds, like old Festamite. If they had that Convocation, I'd be very happy. But generally, just, you know, you buff all the conduits, make them better. That would be awesome. Make it scale better overall and solve a lot of the issues we had with, you know, proper damage output.
Yeah, and Convocation's a really annoying one because it feels like they scaled it, or they made it scale to a point in 9.0 to where it felt just right. But after that, it doesn't really scale any further because it's basically just cooldown reduction on Apocalypse. But once you can start syncing Apocalypse with your other cooldowns like Dark Transformation and Unholy Blight, the value of it just stops. It does not gain any more value. So it's going to be stuck at that like 2.25% DPS increase for the entirety of the rest of the expansion unless they do something with it, which It's a really cool conduit, don't get me wrong. It's one of the best conduits in the game design-wise, but it just needs a little bit extra love to where it continues to scale. Otherwise, stuff like Jaethus in the current raid tier, something about that weapon just doesn't quite click with Unholy. You see stuff like Fury Warriors getting tons of value from it, getting rank. It wants to stick to rank 4 on that weapon just because the strength of it doesn't do a whole lot. Damage proc doesn't do a whole lot either. It's barely better than the other weapons. It's only because of item level.
It's interesting to see. I don't know if there's any other spec that is so dependent on its conduits or maybe as affected as Unholy DK is. And the thought that comes to mind is rogues. It's like they don't have like this dependency. And is it like the only thing that would fix Unholy at this point? Well, fix in like quotations because it's not broken or anything. You know, again, guys, it's still okay. It's fine. You don't have to worry. It's just addressing the core things here. Because why I'm asking, and I understand you guys really want to address like the conduits, but I have a feeling that this whole conduit, Soulbind Covenants thing, I don't think that's going to be a lot of their focus in 9.2. I just have this feeling that
they could
stopping.
They could definitely take it into routes where they could just do the 9.1 route where they add just a couple of more rows with maybe 1 or 2 new conduits as well.
Would you like that though?
It just seems, well, I'd rather, I don't know. I'm actually on the fence here because it's getting more of what we already have. We're getting another thing extra. So I don't know. I'm obviously they're gonna do tier lists. I mean, it's
tier lists. Yeah, they do tier lists a lot, especially in tournaments.
Tier sets. I said sets. It was an edit issue. But if we're gonna get tier sets, what people have been asking for a while and what they've kind of begrudgingly agreed to add eventually 9.2, maybe even double legendary use. Who knows? They're probably not gonna add too much in relation to soul binds because then
this is the thing. Because if they're gonna add another row of binds and slots where you can put conduits, that's just gonna be a whole nother mess. Probably what the boys said, just address whatever is existing now, tune and buff them, whatever, and stop it there. Because if they keep on adding, that oh boy. So this is, I was getting to the point that eventually in 9.2 we're gonna have tier sets, probably 2 legendaries as well. Is there any room there to get some I wouldn't say necessarily fixing the issues of Unholy, but do you guys see it as a more plausible way in 9.2 for addressing some of the things for Unholy DK?
I could definitely see that happening, but Unholy is in this really dangerous spot right now to where if they do something with, say, tier sets that just buffs a specific thing for Unholy that's able to be stacked with other things, it could just scale out of control. It's in that really weird spot right now where 90% of Unholy's damage and 90% of its strength just comes from it stacking all of its buffs and cooldowns into these really nice damage windows. So if they add something to a tier set, for example, that say buffs Army of the Dead, it could get into really dangerous territory and it could make Unholy scale just wildly too well. So the conduits I feel like would be the best spot to target. Other than that, the only thing I could think of that they could target base spec wise would probably be resources. Make runic corruption proc more often, maybe increase the runic power regeneration of festering wounds, so Unholy has a more healthy resource generation and spending, because right now it does feel a little bit starved in some situations.
Yeah, you really need to run Deadliest Coil for it to feel good to play.
Right.
And so speaking of Deadliest Coil, and this is my question for you guys. Some of the specs so far in 9.1 have had a change in their main legendaries. Let's say in Raid, because we're talking about Deadliest Coil here. And Unholy kind of seems to have just the exact same thing, nothing really new changing in terms of legendaries. Obviously, the Covenant legendaries are not particularly amazing. For Unholy, I don't know if there's probably some speculation talk in the accuracy that I might have missed where people are speculating like what 2 legendaries would be broken for Unholy. But do you guys see any balance in the legendary department in 9.2 that could come? Not necessarily balance, but maybe a shift, because after playing for 2 seasons with the same legendary, maybe you kind of want to switch it up a little bit, because we've had tier sets before where they kind of changed at least one aspect of the rotation. I don't know if they're gonna do it this time, but legendaries are kind of supposed to do that now. And obviously nothing's really happening, because I would imagine that Blizzard thought that adding Covenant legendaries would add some spice to the versatility and variability of the specs. What do you guys think of that? And is there a possibility for another legendary to take the Deadliest Coil's place?
Potential of new legendaries.
So when they added all the Covenant ones, they were all AoE ones. Like, they all have good value in AoE, very little value in single target. And that's obviously an issue, right? Because that's not going to change the meta and raid. Like, you would never pick up an AoE legendary. That's all paddy, generally. And for the ones we do have, like the spec-specific ones, Shambler, Frenzy Monstrosity, Deadliest Coil, they all see play in different situations. So I'm kind of happy with the current state. What's the fourth one, by the way? Do we have a fourth one?
Super Strain, I think, is the Unholy specific one, even though it's basically Death Knight wide.
Is it? I thought that was generally DK wide. I'm going to have to look it up. I'll probably forget the last one because we never used it.
So the legendaries are in such a situation where you don't even know what the fourth one is. But you mentioned that, the Covenant ones are aimed at AoE, and yet still, from what I was able to tell last time I checked, in M+, you still use Frenzy Monstrosity, right? So even if they are AoE, they don't seem to outscale Frenzy Monstrosity.
There's not really one that's Unholy specific for the fourth slot. I don't know.
So, on the point of the Covenant specific ones with the AoE versus single target, even in Mythic Plus, right, you don't want to skew yourself too heavily into AoE situations, because then you have the bosses, and obviously it's crucial that you also have the single target throughput on the bosses themselves. So it's kind of, it's always a waiting situation. Do I want more AoE and less single target, or good AoE and good single target? And that's a personal kind of choice you have to make. And Frenzy Monstrosity just does it so well. It works very well in AoE, works really well in single target, and that makes it such a great choice in Mythic Plus.
Yeah, the only other one that's even seen play recently is actually the Night Fae Legendary, just because people have been playing with that build. And I mean, it's not amazing, but it's not bad either. On the Legendary front, when it comes to what they could do to shift things at 9.2, I feel like the only thing that could realistically shift it would be swapping Frenzied Monstrosity to buff all pets, similar to the old Legion Legendary Shoulders. But that also gets into a little bit of a dangerous game, like I said, where you're stacking so many buffs, Unholy could start scaling just wildly.
You can see Master becoming a much bigger thing if that ever happens.
Exactly, yeah. And Frenzied Monstrosity becoming the go-around, or the go-to in both single target and AoE as well, does make a little bit of a boring setup, if you were to ask me, just because it's a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It just doesn't feel great. So I don't know. They'd have to add a new legendary, I think, in order for it to switch things up and still be fun.
Oh, new legendary. Well, what about if the possibility to have two legendaries equipped will become a thing in Night 2? Then what broken things are we looking at here?
Unfortunately, not too much, right?
There is that thing with Frenzied Monstrosity and Deadliest Coil, though. Basically, the buff of Frenzied Monstrosity stays on the pet for the entire duration of
That's true,
Dark Transformation. And if you have Deadliest Coil and Frenzied Monstrosity, you have basically a 30-second Dark Transformation, which is buffed by 12% and gets 12% increased attack speed for that entire duration. So it's basically making the ghoul just scale stupidly well. I think adding them both together would be like 15% total DPS increase, rather than the about 8 and 6% they are right now.
Right. I think it's a bit unfortunate, because you would think they would work better together. Because when you read Frenzy Monstrosity, you would think that the damage increase on yourself would work for the entire Dark Transformation duration, but it's fixed at 15 seconds. So increasing your Dark Transformation duration only increases the buff on your pet, not yourself.
Yeah, so it makes the stacking of those legendaries less valuable. It's only like 1%, not great.
Yeah.
Well, talking about 9.2 is good, because it's kind of like around the corner, and we're a little bit excited. I did want to circle back a little bit, because we're still probably going to be in 9.1.5 for at least 3 more months, maybe. Probably. So, and there have been a couple of changes that initially, when they were announced, people were up in arms, and obviously anti-magic zone is one of them. We have a blood decay, which makes anti-magic zone a little bit better in our raid now, and it's still really good. I don't know exactly how it functions for Unholy, but maybe we can talk a little bit about that, and essentially how Unholy plays in 9.1.5
5.
As a 9.1.5, sure. I know there was one other thing that I wanted to mention besides anti-magic zone.
Probably the AoE cap.
Yes, exactly. And
I read minds.
We can talk exactly. Oh, great minds think alike. And how did the AoE cap affect, if at all, Unholy in 9.1.5? We can talk about some of the more current things, and hopefully get some of the new Unholies that are looking to play alts right now, because alts are more accessible. A little bit more interested in the spec.
I can start off with ANZ since I do raid quite a bit, and I feel personally, it feels strong still. Like, obviously, it sometimes breaks, but in most situations, when you put it down, it won't reach its damage cap, and you feel it's impactful because it absorbs a significant amount of damage right when you need it. Multiple bosses have places where it's very useful. You have Painsmith when you trigger the mines. You have Soul Render when you trigger the chains. Like, pretty much every single boss has this big damage magic nuke on the raid where you can put down AMZ and be useful. And even though it's capped, it still helps your raid survive, because those are the pain points. That's when you could die. And AMZ, just 20% damage reduction. Very well. I don't know. It's still useful. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's not useless now that it's capped. It's still good.
Yeah. If anything, it was just icing on the cake back in 9.0. Like, we were already really good at what we did in 9.0, and adding the really strong AMZ on top of that, it was just icing on the cake. Now that it's weaker, it doesn't make it bad, not in the slightest. It's just not quite as used because Death Knight's not quite as good.
I remember the uproar when they first announced that shit. Jesus Christ, man. It was like...
The initial nerf was like, when they announced it, that was real harsh, man. They buffed it back up later.
True. Yes. The first...
In Blizzard fashion.
Yeah.
That's fine. So what about the AoE soft cap changes? So I was really curious to ask. Like,
maybe we can actually go a little bit, because I know this is still, after playing Unholy as one of my most played DPS in years, I still have a little bit of a hard time figuring exactly where the cap is, because I remember in 8.3 it was 20 targets. Was it like a hard cap? I think it was or maybe it was still a soft cap.
It was a beast, man.
It was like
it was ridiculous.
The bursting sword scaling, and now, like, I don't know what to think anymore. So if you guys can elaborate on that a little bit and how this all affected. You don't really need to go super deep into math, but at least what to expect when you like pull 1 pack as opposed to 2 packs as opposed to 3 packs or stuff like that.
Right. This brings back the conversation to good old quadratic scaling.
Hello.
Was a buzzword back in BFA, right? So the way Unholy works when running Bursting Swords and Effective Claws is that when you add additional targets, the number of wounds you generate scales linearly. However, since each wound explodes at all targets, the damage of each wound will also scale linearly. And when you do linear times linear, you get quadratic. This means that if you double the amount of targets you hit, you get 4 times the amount of damage. And that's just bonkers, right? So if you go from 10 to 20, 4 times the damage, it just scales so well. You also add Festamite, which just add on top of it. However, current state of the game, right? So Bursting Swords deals linear damage up to 8 targets they hit around you. This means that at 9 targets, your Bursting Swords starts seeing the square root scaling. You've probably seen that in the patch notes. Lots of spells, they scale linearly up to some specific amount, and then they start doing square root. Effectively, if we assume that Bursting Swords, if we can burst them all, I'll get to that later, we'll get quadratic scaling up to 9 targets, and then we got x to the power 1.5 afterwards. So it's not quite quadratic scaling, but it's close quadratic scaling, right? However, this assumes we can burst all the wounds, and when you start hitting large target counts, this is starting to get a bit of an issue. Scourge Strike and Clawing Shadows are capped at 5 targets in Death and Decay. So if you generate like 40 wounds, there's no way in hell you're going to have time to burst all of those in your Death and Decay window. Right. Long story short, we scale very well, but unfortunately we can't realize our scaling because we are still capped in how we kind of translate our setup into damage.
And that's mostly a problem of Scourge Strike, hitting fewer targets?
Yes. So I had a dream that they would uncap Scourge Strike, right? They could do the square root scaling up to 5 targets, I don't care. But if you uncap Scourge Strike, we go from having Unholy, which scales, really quite well, to BFA Unholy, which is like, a powerhouse in AoE.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do have a graph that I linked to you guys if you wanted to show that in the video as well for what he's talking about. It's insane how much it would scale. But sadly, with the Scourge Strike cap at 5, it limits things massively. Granted, Unholy did get a minor buff from the uncapping of Bursting Swords as well as Shambler in 9.1.5, but sadly, it's not impactful in 99% of situations because you aren't really hitting 9+ targets in those scenarios most of the time. There's not very many Mythic Plus pulls where you're going to pull that many targets. So realistically, Unholy is pretty much unchanged in 9.1.5 when it comes to AoE, which is a bit sad, honestly.
There's so much potential, man. Like Shambler being uncapped means that when it comes into like a 40 target pool, I think it puts a wound on every single target. That's 40 wounds insta. And if you have Deafen K uncapped, you could have Shambler coming in, 40 wounds, Deafen K, burst all of those wounds in a single Scourge Strike.
And blow up an entire pack.
So basically, all the other DPS
would be dead instantly.
Yeah. Other DPS gonna just sit back and enjoy the show.
They're gonna get their well-fed buff while you kill the pack alone.
I understand, that the fact that in uncapped Scourge Strike is because Unholy would just scale incredibly well, and it's a bit unfair that one spec just scales so much better. However, it's incredibly fun, and I think they should still do it because it's awesome.
I know, man, it's really interesting to see how like when the game was a little bit stupid and fun, people were just more enticed to actually play it. Because it's the elephant in the room is the player base is pretty low at the moment. I don't know if it's an all-time low, but
I'm pretty sure it's an all-time. I think WoD was even more populated back in the day than this.
And I think this whole AoE uncap, I don't know, we can say that Mike Barra might have had something to do with it by saying on the streams like, man, I fucking hate this.
People say I don't think he went there with the fucking scepter in his hands like
no.
Command you.
Whether or not he had anything to do with it, it was clear. It was clear that.
There has to be a chat had to be hit there.
It was clear that it's just silly. Like, okay, maybe I don't know if the damage can be addressed for Unholy in terms of Scourge Strike, but it just feels weird that you're just not hitting all of the targets that are present there with something that's supposed to hit in AoE. It was kind of like the Blade Storm argument of Warrior. You just have like 20 mobs around you and you're splitting with your sword and you're hitting like 8 of them. It's like, sorry, dude, you're too much. You just sit in the back. I'm hitting the other guys.
If there's a fantasy, right, is if there's 20 targets there and you like throw your thing around, realistically and in a fantasy world, you hit those. They're there. How can you tell me, wait, 8 targets, then square root this, and let me put some math in your fantasy so it all works out. Let's come on, man, bring it back to, because I think Biceps made a really good point. BFA Unholy DK, apart from feeling super fun and being like this, it was the fun element to it. But also, I remember watching streams, and I think even MDIs at some point. It was so much fun to see.
1 million DPS.
Yeah, that was such an entertaining, spectacular thing. And this is the thing. It was not like, oh my God, you're just rolling your face on the keyboard. Nah, because Unholy DK wasn't all, this 2-button spec. You had to know what the fuck you were doing.
There was one of the more complicated setups that I had to do, and I kind of dabbled into all of the specs in BFA, and maybe this is more relevant to any argument when it comes to design, because let's say the kind of content that we do ranges from like a little bit below average to a little bit above average, the average player, what we do. Yeah. So we kind of like touch all of at least the major core aspects of the game. And it never felt like, oh, if I bring my Unholy, I will just carry the whole group all the time. It wasn't that, at least for the average player, because Blizzard...
It felt like that when Biceps joined our groups.
Blizzard has this, it has this either unspoken or at least not touched recently attitude of, not designing the game for like the hardcore players, the high-end game players. So if they're not going to design that, then why change aspects like Unholy scaling? Because your average Joe wasn't going to pull 1 million DPS in dungeons, right? And
Yeah, I get you.
either adjust it and design it for like the majority of the player base, the average player base, or adjust it for the end game. But there seems to be selectively choosing this is for the end game, this is for the average game, and it just feels like you're not part of the party, right? Like everybody's just having fun in the kitchen and in the living room. When you're in the kitchen, just pouring punches for everybody's like, hey guys, I come. It's like, okay, only 8 cups at a time. I don't know.
Yeah. Thing is also that when Holy scaled that well, it wasn't really meta in the normal, dungeon.
Yeah.
When you play with your friends, right? Or if you try to push keys, Unholy wasn't meta. It was only meta in specific instance in the MDI. So even with insane scaling, it still wasn't, the be-all, end-all.
And apart from the setup, you needed specific tanks and healers that can compensate. Like I'm thinking Underrod.
Oh yeah, play around you and
where you had monks because monks could handle the most amount of dispels, I think, right? For the whatever the things that casted all the little diseases and stuff that you had, because Unholy just needed to like not give a fuck about that and not give a fuck about kicks and stuns. Yeah. So just do your thing. So it felt like there was like a drawback.
But that was a beautiful thing, right? This is one fun aspect of I would say, multiplayer game, a massively multiplayer game when you have, all these interactions. Okay, so we have the Unholy DK boy here. Let's all let him do his thing and we play around him, because if he plays on this thing, we're gonna have been carried all this goddamn dungeon.
I mean, that was kind of what was happening in 9.0 with fire mages, right? Everybody was kind of catering to getting the fire mage to like 200k DPS or whatever.
Talking about PIs and stuff,
Yeah, so I don't know. It just feels a little bit inconsistent in their choice of design. So I hope that specifically changed, because I never thought Unholy was particularly easy to play. And
no, I'm still scared of it. Taze want to say
maybe a more general question to move into new things.
Let Taze speak, man. I want to say something.
Oh shit! Oh my bad, man.
What you want? Sorry, I was just gonna pipe in with. I think the reason why they capped Unholy specifically, even though it wasn't meta, even though it wasn't like stupidly broken, is because of the fact that if you played Unholy well, you could break instance servers. I remember so many times in 8.3 going into the hive mind room, pulling all the trash up to it, and just exploding for like 2.5 million DPS, lagging everybody in the entire raid instance for like a solid minute. It was good times, but it breaks Blizzard servers.
I see that for sure.
Not only the damage scales sporadically, it's also the number of damage events.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bit of an issue.
Oh man, I didn't know that, but I can totally see them being concerned about shit like that, for sure. I mean, it's still fun, but not fun.
I mean, aren't we at a point where we could expect a little bit more crazy fun? I mean, they've been doing
corruptions was crazy fun.
Well, the thing is, like we can trash at anything however we want, but the balance is kind of okay at the moment between all classes, all specs, all roles as well. Maybe the best it's ever been.
Yeah, we said this a lot, but it is true.
Because when things are crazy and fun, we kind of complain that they're imbalanced. But now that they're balanced, we go
the other route, man. We want that crazy shit back. We're humans, man. We like that. What can you do?
Let us have fun, Blizzard.
Yeah, he's right. The constant of Blizzard, at least for the last 5 to 6 years, is like, the fun police. It's like if things get too fun,
Well, I get it, because if not everybody's having fun, the ones that are not are very loud. It's like, hey man, make me fun too, and maybe just making them fun. Like like they once said, do you remember in the old Blizzard Testament when they said fun before balance, or buffs before nerfs or stuff like that? They were saying that they'd rather do buffs.
I'm so tired of those quotes and shit.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
I guess we'll find out.
Let's get back to Unholy
with more PTR to 9.2 talks, but
we'll see.
What I wanted to pose like a more general question, because you've obviously this is true for any expansion, but you guys have been playing for 2 patches, let's say 2.5 patches now. In the way, because we initially in the first episode we talked about stuff like like dead talents and what could be improved, what could be redesigned. After playing for 2 other patches, and has any of that changed, or do you have like any new additions, any new designs? Like, okay, after playing with this is kind of okay now, or this has turned out to be actually pretty shit, like the Convocation of the Dead Conduit. Can we address this? Like, what are like, let's say, like conclusions after a couple of patches? Like, what could be done for Unholy?
I'm of the opinion that if they change something, it might actually turn Unholy into a less fun spec. Like the current meta with Unholy Blight and Army of the Dead, it kind of works out very well in a raiding situation. You need to think about your cooldown timings. There's a lot of optimization to be done. You know, you got Soul Reaper, which you need to optimize. There's a lot in there where a good player can play better than a bad player, right? Compare that to BFA, you know, there was like nothing you could do.
RNG.
Oh yeah, just hit your normal rotation, that's it. So if they were to buff some talents, we might move away from this, you know, Unholy Blight, Dark Transformation, Apocalypse window play, and that will probably make Unholy less fun in raiding. I'm just a bit hesitant, so, you know, I'm kind of all right with the state of things. They could obviously buff us overall, and they could maybe make some talents a bit more viable, but I personally wouldn't want to see a whole, you know, talent shift.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the final row of talents. If they buff any of those other final row talents to be better than Army of the Damned, Unholy is going to play like a drunk toddler, and it's not going to be fun. And that is a dangerous game to play, Blizzard. Don't buff Gargoyle. Don't do it.
Oh my God.
Anyways.
It's all serious, man.
Anyways, so the other talent rows, though, they do have some wiggle room. So in the first row, every one of the talents has some really good use cases. You have, Infected Claws, you have Clawing Shadows, and then you have All Will Serve. All of those are really good talents. Let those be. Second row, Unholy Blight, Ebon Fever, and Bursting Swords. Ebon Fever, it still has its uses nichely, but without the Virulent Eruption, I think it was called, it's a little bit worse, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Leave it
also
be.
the fact that Outbreak doesn't reapply the dot, right, making it significantly worse.
Exactly. And then when you move down to the second to last row, or sorry, not second. Is it second to last? Yeah.
I think
so
it
you
is,
have so you have Defile, Unholy Pact, and Pestilence.
Do we still have
that
Pestilence?
Yeah, that one. So like Defile kind of has its uses now with the Night Fae build and Mythic Plus specifically. It's really like, it's not amazing, but it's not bad. And then you have Pestilence, which is just sad times. Like, replace that talent, redesign it, uncap the wound generation. Like, come on. And then the row with Soul Reaper as well is just... They can't buff that row either.
Oh, wow.
That one's a dangerous game to play with because you have Pestilent Pustules, which works really, really well with Infected Claws and Bursting Swords. That gives you tons of resources to play with. And you have Soul Reaper there as well. Then right in the middle of those, you have... what's it called? Harbinger of Doom, I think it is.
Anyways, is there even a talent?
The sudden doom buff?
Yeah, basically it increases the proc chance of sudden doom and allows you to stack 2 charges. There's a really dangerous game with that talent specifically that they just can't do anything with. If they buff it too much, Army of the Damned and Gargoyle start scaling just out of control. And that Unholy Assault's just left to do basically nothing. So the reason why it's in that position right now is just because they're scared of it in a way. If they buff it, it could be just insanely strong. If they leave it there, it's just a dead talent. So that one kind of has to stay the way it is.
I feel like they have the potential to maybe replicate-ish how we used to play with Dark Arbiter. And I obviously loved to play Dark Arbiter back in the day. It was so much fun. It was like, if you got a great Arbiter, it was like a thrill. You're like, oh, hell yeah, this was awesome. However, I'm not too sure if they can replicate it in the same way and if it's going to work out the same way. I think it might be nice if it's a viable talent choice, but it also might be a bit not nice to play. I don't know.
Bicep, you've seen the optimal opener with Gargoyle. You don't want that. You don't want it.
Yeah, it's a shame that they just didn't keep Dark Arbiter. I don't know. Obviously, we want change. We don't want it to be stale. I shouldn't come in and be like, all conservative and be like, no, don't change anything. It's nice when you change stuff, when you find new builds. I'm just a tiny bit worried that we will have a deterioration in the fun of playing Unholy. That's it.
Yeah, to kind of elaborate on what I brought up with Bicep, the Gargoyle opener specifically, if that talent were to become the best, it ends up being this just weird game of trying to align all of your cooldowns, but also building runic power before the gargoyle, making sure your army, your gargoyle, your unholy blight, your unholy pact, as well as any other buffs that you have, like trinkets, any of that, are all lined up in the same period of time. So you end up having this like 25-second opener, but basically like beta unholy, and it's just not a good time.
Okay, well, in the range of 9.1.5, and with all this ease of access to Covenant, I do want to ask you guys, how come there's no Kyrian DKs? Can we get a little bit on to talking about the other Covenants? Because, okay, Necro, I mean, thematically, you know, numbers-wise, you know, it's there. You know, it's the DK Covenant, no doubt. Taste mentioned, you know, a fun build for Night Fae. That's all cool, but you guys haven't mentioned anything about Venthyr or Kyrian. Obviously, people now are going to be much more inclined to try out new Covenants because it's a lot more easier to get into. So, what are we looking at here? I'm looking at Swarming Mist from Venthyr. On paper, it looks interesting, but you know.
And I know Frost DK likes that with breath.
So,
Venthyr is generally considered the superior Mythic Plus Covenant for Unholy.
Yeah,
the short,
Ventyr's great.
Yeah, short Swarming Mist cooldown makes you able to press it on majority packs, and then just leverage that runic power gain into epidemic spam, and it just works very well. It's great, scales greatly with additional targets. It will generally give you the best damage.
But
Kyrian. Yeah, sorry?
No, I was just gonna, but what about Abomination Limb? You trade that for that?
Abomination Limb, yeah, it's nice. You know, you can grip stuff in, it feels good to press, and it deals quite a lot of damage, but Swarming Mist deals more damage, and it also indirectly gives you a ton of damage through the runic power gain. Right. So it's quite clearly better to run Swarming Mist, and it's been the general recommendation that if you only run Mythic Plus, Venthyr is probably your best bet. If you play Kyrian with the Kyrian legendary right now, I think it's still bugged. You will deal a lot of damage, but that's probably going to be fixed soon. I don't know. Kyrian is a weird spot for Unholy.
It's
yeah. Everybody and their mama playing Kyrian now.
No, man. No. I mean, I know in terms of like numbers, you know, Swarming Mist is the thing to go and shit. But man, I don't know. Whenever I see that Abomination Limb pop up, all of those hands going on left to right, that is so DK. That is so thematically right. Yeah. You cannot go wrong. Even if you're like, what is? Do you guys know the differences? Like theory crafting wise, the percentages and then in damage from Swarming Mist to Abomination Limb, are these that huge?
It's always difficult to quantify in Mythic Plus situations, but it's a significant gain to run Swarming Mist.
So it's significant, okay.
Yeah. If we were to look at Dungeon Slice, I actually have some numbers up over here. Dungeon Slice does work all right for DK people. Don't chastise me. I'm the one who wrote it. Anyways, so looking at Dungeon Slice, Swarming Mist is about 1.5% ahead of Abomination Limb if we're looking at best Soulbind to best Soulbind, which it's not major, but if we're talking in the terms of Unholy DPS, that's like 1,500 to 2,000 DPS. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah, I get you.
Well, for Kyrian, I feel like it's in this weird spot where it's okay. All Covenants are fine. You know, you can play whatever you want and it's going to do well. Kyrian is, it's good on single target and it's also okay in AoE, but the Shackle of the Unworthy just doesn't scale that well in AoE. Right?
Yeah, you have to
spread it. You know, it has to go around to everyone. It's not easy to set up. You need to kind of plan around it. Use it, pop down Deafening K and spam rune abilities, that kind of thing. I don't know. It's obviously fine. It will deal roughly the same damage, but it's not thematically good and it's not significantly good in damage. I don't know.
Yeah, and if you're not using the Kyrian Legendary as well, you end up being starved on resources as soon as you're dropping D&D and you're going into your Scourge Strike spam. So you don't even really get a chance to really spread it to all the targets. It just does not feel good to play in Mythic Plus. In single target, it's kind of awkward too because it's a minute cooldown and you're on a 45-second cycle and it's just awkward. It just doesn't work super well for Unholy.
It's interesting in AoE situations because you obviously, so if you don't know, Shackle Unworthy, it now has 100% chance to spread whenever you hit it with an ability which costs any number of runes. So what you generally want to do is, press it and then make sure you attack enemies that have the dot with abilities that cost runes, right? That's the whole idea. The issue is that if you look at the Unholy DK setup in AoE, you spend a whole lot of time not really hitting many rune spending abilities, and then you go into your Deafening K window and then you start spamming this low-cost Scourge Strike, right? So ideally, you want to use your dot before you go into Deafening K. However, if the pack doesn't live long, the dot is not going to last for that long, right? Yeah. You want to use the dot at the start so that it lasts through the entire pack, but that just doesn't really work with Unholy setup. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just in this awkward spot.
Clunky. Yeah.
Plus, it doesn't look good. I'll add that. I don't think I ever saw a Kyrian DK, Unholy at least.
Thank God. Can you imagine wearing those white wings?
Man, but there's Night Fate DKs. I mean,
hey, there was almost a time when 9.1 launched when we were almost going to go Forge Light Prime until they fixed that. Thank God.
Well,
Unholy Mastery worked with the Bron dude, which was good damage.
It was broken.
I think we're still good with the Covenants part. So in general, I guess in terms of like mid-tier content, all Covenants will work fine. If you really want to push stuff like Mythic plus, plus 20 and more, I'm guessing Venti would be the way for sure.
I think they've done a good job. If you remember start of Shadowlands, the difference between the Covenants was quite significant, right?
Yeah.
But they've kind of buffed the Soulbinds, gave some bumps along the line to a point where all Covenants are really tightly tuned at the moment. That's my point of view, which I think is great because anyone can play whatever they fancy, right? Without having to sacrifice DPS or whatever.
Yeah, it's really strange how well DK is balanced for Covenants in general. If you look at any of the specs, all of them are really solid, except maybe Blood. I don't delve too deep into Blood, so I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, if you're Frost DK, you can play any Covenant. If you're Unholy DK, you can play any Covenant, and you could succeed. You can kill Mythic Sylvanas as a Kyrian Unholy DK. There's no reason that you couldn't keep up with DPS.
There you go.
It's great, honestly.
Speaking of Mythic Sylvanas, probably the progress has already been made, but guilds are still, fighting Mythic Sylvanas and even Heroic Sylvanas for people who just run Heroic. How do you guys feel Unholy performs on, let's say, the last boss of Sanctum of Domination? Because if we're gonna be raiding for a couple of months more, people are probably still gonna kill it. Maybe they want to use Unholy as an alt. How do you think that fight is designed? And if you think it's worth mentioning, how do you think the raid is designed for Unholy, since it's a little bit different than Nether, like you guys mentioned earlier?
Pet AI sucks.
Yes!
A lot of people have that issue there with the pets.
Oh, man.
That's the main point.
Yeah. I'm currently farming Mythic Sylvanas. I think I have a good insight here when it comes to the fight. So Unholy does well on good damage parts, parts where you actually need the damage. Unholy is great. However, we're bad at padding on the fight, so we don't show up on the meters. I spend all my time thinking, how can I optimize DPS here to pad a little bit more so I can actually get a good log, Yeah. And it's tricky. Generally,
super strain, ebb and fever, and then pad on all the arrows.
They don't live long enough. You have the boomies, they just hit them all and they die. I don't know. So
Goddamn
overall, couple of points, right? So Unholy isn't great at the upfront AoE you get on the platforms in the second phase. Not great. However, we are very good at killing what we actually need to kill because we can use army to funnel our damage into specific targets, yeah? The platforms just suck with the pet II because when you run to the next platform, the pet stays. You have to put it on passive, put it on follow, make it run next to you.
Yeah, reboot it. Unplug it and plug it back in.
I don't know.
Usually it's better to just dismiss and resummon. It's stupid.
That's all.
Come on, Blizzard.
I don't like it. Also in the first phase, sometimes just sticks next to me and doesn't run next to this. I don't know. Pet II doesn't work well. However, final phase Unholy does solid damage. We have the late lost with army. We do very well in those situations. We have generally run Fleshcraft. We have lots of defensives. So if you have to jump across with an arrow, we could just channel Fleshcraft and just not die. I found myself, being very tanky and generally doing solid damage in the final phase. Unfortunate that we can't use Soul Reaper. If we could use Soul Reaper, we would be very good for the fight.
Execute
now we're kind of
warriors
okay,
are feeling
but we
the
don't show
pain.
up how in the meters because we can't patch.
So feels so bad.
Yeah. I was going to say, if we could use Soul Reaper and Sylvanas, we would be really good. It's just a shame that
Do you actually
45%
talent
loss.
into it?
Yay.
General
No, we don't even
comments?
balance it.
Yeah, I know. I sometimes forget. Overall comments about the raid, from my point of view, I raid in a guild which is like, I think it's ranked 600-700. I can top the DPS. You know, it's definitely there. It's not like it's impossible for me, and I feel like that's in a good spot. If I log, 95, 99%, I can beat other guys that log like 50% or those kind of things, and then I'm happy. We are useful in multiple bosses due to how our late bloodlust burst works, right? We have Fate Scribe, you lost in the final phase. Army works very well. We can pump damage there. Painsmith, we lost late. Army, pump damage. Kel'Thuzad, we lost late. Army, pump damage. You get it? Even though we don't show up top on the meters, we do very good priority damage when it is needed.
Yeah,
and also
especially...
Yeah.
I was going to say, especially when we consider IQD into that equation, you're getting multiple IQD buffs in that scenario because you can get at the start of the fight with your first army, and then the lusted one later in the fight, and it just creates some stupid damage that Unholy can do. It'll burst up to 30, 40k DPS, not super hard with a good buff overlap, which is great for that priority damage.
All right. Well, and what about Mythic Plus? Because Prideful was maybe like an easy seasonal affix to think about and quantify. Is just a percent damage increase. What about the anima part, the tormented affix? Like, because I know that for instance, for Frost Mage, I know that the Champions brand with the crit one changed a little bit how you build the spec, because you just get a lot of crit from there, and other specs really love the specific stats from it. What does Unholy do in Mythic Plus? Something that shines or is outstanding?
Nah.
You do consistent AoE, you do consistent boss damage, and there's not really much else. Like you take Champion's Brand, you take the dagger. Like it doesn't do anything special. But the only thing like Champion's Brand is really good for Unholy though, because it likes both mastery and crit and AoE, which is great. So that's a thing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. Sorry, we can't be more exciting here, but it isn't really exciting.
Yeah.
No,
I was almost ready
we can
to
fund
see
an
a
army
tier
into the lieutenants or whatever they're called, but that doesn't really matter because they're not that dangerous anyway. Obviously, Amy said it's not as useful because that could always be used on every pride, and now it can kind of be used on the frost guy and the fire guy, but it's not that useful. So we'd obviously lost some power there. But overall,
yeah, it's okay. Not best, not worst. It's okay.
Oh, so I was hoping to scoop some juicy stuff here.
No, I mean it's fine.
Nah.
I think the general conclusion, for let's say the state of Unholy DK in 9.1.5, it's still a very good spec. There's like not like super major issues, especially for the majority of the player base, I would say, because if you want to go between 15 to 20s, you'll be super good. Folks just talked about being top DPS in Mythic, so if you do it right, there's absolutely no issues.
Yeah.
However, as the boys mentioned, one of the most important things Blizzard can do is actually look at the conduits and maybe address those in some way. Although I'll do defend this. They shouldn't add any more new conduits or rows or anything. That system should be, that's it. Because if we get tier 6,
don't do that, we won't scale well with it.
We will scale like
conduits.
garbage.
Yeah. So no, that's what I'm saying. Stop it with the sublines. I guess because even lore wise or thematically, right? We should be getting into this. Okay, we're done. We're going whatever the fuck we're going. The confidence did their part. Whatever, just. Stop it.
Yeah, well, what are we gonna get 40 more levels of renown?
Oh, no, please, no. I mean,
didn't they talk at one point that they said that they would add more soul binds?
Well, they did for 9.1 because some soul bind slots.
No, more soul binds.
Oh, more characters. Yeah, no, that they did. Do you know what that means, man? that means another dude with a lot of passives that is just gonna be a mess. Plus, for all intents
Scrap
and
that idea, Blizzard.
Yeah,
please.
yeah. It's not. If they're gonna bring tier sets, I mean, that's enough. Okay, that's cool. That's gonna be
my point exactly. It's enough of all these power systems out there, and
Yeah.
I do have to agree with you guys. I do think that the current Unholy build is one of the most fun DPS specs designed in terms of how you're supposed to play it. It kind of sucks that it's like, I wouldn't necessarily want to say cookie cutter, but the variety doesn't the variety options are not that interesting, let's say. Like the alternatives to the playstyle are not that interesting, so I guess that's maybe better for Blizzard to not, fiddle with the spec a little bit too much.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
just
honestly, we got lucky that this build ended up being the strongest build. If any other build ended up being stronger, Unholy would feel like such shit. It's not even funny.
No, I mean they don't have they shouldn't buff Gargoyle. Taze just talked about.
But that's like how much shit are you getting for that opinion? Because I know a lot of people want a Gargoyle back.
Yeah, well,
I know I'm probably gonna get chastised for it, but you guys don't want it. No matter how much you think you do, I'm sounding like Blizzard right now.
Ooh, careful there.
Look,
That attitude doesn't have a good track record, man.
I know. But Gargoyle, the opener is so clunky. It does not play very well. I know it sounds cool, but just 10.0, just patience, please.
yeah.
Don't ruin Unholy.
I'm very happy.
He's very happy. Bicep is a very happy boy. Yeah, I mean, it feels like we kind of like addressed the majority of things, and I think it boiled down for a really good chat.
My main goal was to like hopefully eliminate some community misconception about Unholy, because you haven't seen Unholy in a long time, and I think maybe people just took the anti-magic zone nerfs too hard,
And all that scaling thing as well is like,
and
Bring
plus,
up the mastery nerf a lot as well. I see that all over the place.
Yeah, like the mastery nerf, that was justified. If that wasn't nerfed, Unholy would be just broken.
Mastery was nerfed, and Holy was still the best melee spec in Castle Northia.
there you go.
So imagine if Mastery hadn't been nerfed, Unholy would have been bonkers.
5 Unholies in a raid. That's the new thing.
5. You would have seen Echo running like 15.
Definitely, man. If it was to be that broken, and it by all accounts purposes, it could have been without the mastery nerf. So, yeah. But cool. I guess
That's great. We have a spec that we're happy with.
I mean,
Good job, Blizzard.
yeah.
Yeah,
Buff the
I'm
conduits,
happy
but-
with the state of Unholy. It's a good spec. Just please buff conduits. Just like rework convocation, please.
I mean,
please.
I'm gonna make that the title of the video. Just
But buff conduits. State of Unholy.
Yeah,
There you go.
That's it. That's the title of it. There's no turning back. But yeah, really great chat. I'm happy that we covered a couple of things. Basically, kind of looking at how things were, and I know how things are right now. I know what the AoE cap has done to the spec. We kind of iterated on that, and I'm really excited to see what's gonna happen. What's gonna happen? Yeah, that's how we speak. What's gonna happen in 9.2? And maybe 10.0 as well.
We'll see how they address all the class changes and stuff like that, because Unholy did receive a lot of changes coming into Shadowlands, so it's good that for once we do see maybe we can use Unholy as a good example for spec and spec design in the future as well. So thank you guys for agreeing to have this chat. Kind of like on a short notice. It's always really cool to chat Unholy with you guys. And if you want to find out and see them a little bit more, the links are down in the description. I know Bicep streams and has more advanced videos on YouTube, and Taze is just like a big fat brain in the Accuracy Discord, which you should definitely check as well, especially if you want to understand what happens under the hood of Unholy.
Oh yeah. And once again, as always, very grateful to have you boys on. Thank you, Biceps. Thank you, Taze, taking the time, chatting with us. Always a blast. And until 9.2 comes around, then we'll have more to discuss and
Hopefully,
debate.
still happy about the spec by then.
Yeah. Let's see how happy we will be in 9.2.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well, thank you, boys. And
Thanks.
Thank you very much for having me.
for a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
Of course.
And also, thank you for watching, or you for listening. I don't know where you are, man. I don't know what you're doing with your life, but listen, thank you for listening until this point. You can find us everywhere. As always, Spotify, Google Podcast, iTunes, all of that, and on YouTube. But if you're listening to this on Spotify, just take a minute and go to the YouTube page and check the links in the description for the boys. They really do deserve it. So that being said, bye-bye.
Have a great day.
And see you next Monday.
Don't drink and drive.
Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.